to another episode of Your Right to Know, brought to you by the Fitchburg Republican City Committee. We are coming to you from the Workers Credit Union studios here at FATV. I'll be your co-host, Andrew Couture, and with me as always is my friend, Mary Lotze. And tonight we have a really special guest, Republican candidate for Lieutenant Governor, Leah Cole-Allen. How are you doing, Leah?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Why don't we start out, the conversation by telling the voters a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm a Massachusetts native. I was born and raised in Lynn. I graduated Lynn Public Schools, and then I am now a wife, married to a union elevator mechanic, Local 4 Boston. I have 2 young children. I'm a former state representative and a registered nurse.
Wow, you got your plate pretty full there.
Yes.
So you traveled all over the state for the campaign. In these closing weeks of the campaign, what are some of the major issues that you're hearing from the voters?
Well, absolutely, people are concerned about the vaccine mandates, and that's something that hits home for me as well, because I was, when I left politics, I was working at a local hospital, Beverly Hospital, worked there for about 5 years, right into the pandemic. I was pregnant with my second child during that time, worked on the first designated COVID floor when there wasn't no vaccine available, and I left on maternity leave, and when I wanted to return to work, I was told by my employer that due to the government mandates, I had to consent to being vaccinated with the COVID shot, otherwise I wasn't allowed to return to work. And so I wasn't comfortable with that because it's brand new technology that hasn't been well studied. I was nursing my baby at the time, and actually we've seen recent research that shows that there is some transfer of the vaccine to infants for mothers who are nursing. And I decided I wasn't going to take that shot, and because of that I was let go from my job. And that's happened to people across the Commonwealth, not only in state jobs, which Jeff Deal and I have said that on day one, we would get rid of that vaccine mandate. We would rehire all the state workers who lost their jobs over that mandate. And on day 2, we would fire everyone who thought that was a good idea, because we need people in state government who are going to stand up for the rights of people. So that's been a huge issue that everyone's talking about, as well as parents are really concerned. They're concerned about their kids and the learning losses that happened while schools were shut down over COVID, and how long that went on, what their kids went through with the masking and the isolation. And now that they're returning to school, they're concerned about some of the curriculum that their kids are being taught, and they feel really shut out of that process. They've tried to go to school committee meetings and raise their concerns, and a lot of times either their microphones are shut off, or the meeting is ended, or there's no public comment available, and parents are really concerned about that. And the number one issue lately, especially heading into the colder months, is our economy, the cost of living here in Massachusetts, and what our energy costs are going to look like heading into the winter.
So were these subjects a surprise to you to hear this? Or? For
me, one of the things that made me want to get back into politics was, of course, the mandates, but also what I saw, the way COVID was handled at the state level, and the fact that our big box stores were allowed to stay open while our small businesses were forced to close. And that really wrought havoc on our economy. And again, the children. So I am not surprised by these concerns. I think as someone who is just a normal, everyday working person in Massachusetts, I identify a lot with the concerns that people have in Massachusetts. And definitely, I think going into November, people need to be aware that the Democrat policies in Massachusetts that have been going on for a long time are really coming home to roost now, and they're hurting people. I mean, we have Maura Healey, who's running for governor, who was bragging not too long ago about shutting down 2 pipelines coming into Massachusetts. And as a direct result of her actions, because they are so fanatical about their climate agenda, Massachusetts people are bearing the brunt of that unfairly, because now our rates are going up and people are going to be paying more for heating their homes at a time when they're paying more for gas and groceries, and inflation has caused everything to go up, and it's really hurting the people of Massachusetts, and we need leadership that's going to put in policies that are going to give some relief to the people in the state.
Well, as she would say, that's how forests grow, right?
I'd rather not see everything burn.
As people are burning the country down around us.
I guess while they're burning firewood to keep their homes heated, that's how forests grow, right?
So the polling figures for unenrolled voters is looking pretty favorable. I mean, I really have a real positive feeling about this election. What are your feelings about that? What are you hearing from the voters?
Yeah, I think there's a huge groundswell of people. I think a lot of times in the media, they're viewing Massachusetts through a pre-pandemic lens. So they're expecting the same kinds of patterns that they saw in elections prior to the pandemic. But what the people of Massachusetts went through over the past going on 3 years now, I think has really woke a lot of people up. And they're paying attention to politics in a way that they hadn't before, because now it's their children's futures on the line, it's providing for their families, it's really making sure that the government isn't infringing on their rights. The government has a role to play, but it doesn't need to be in your personal life making decisions like healthcare choices. And I think that it's kind of that silent majority. There's really a groundswell going on that people are tired of it, and it's a microcosm of, I think, a rejection of really a lot of the failed policies of the Biden administration on a federal level.
Do you see this, obviously, when you go around, do you feel people coming up to you and reacting to you now as the campaign's gone along differently than when you first announced, you and Jeff Deal Jeff announced over a year ago, and of course he had some name recognition anyway. But have you seen a shift you're talking about a groundswell, have you seen it as you go through town to town and seen more people come out and want to hear your message and support you?
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people that say, I used to be a Democrat, I used to be a liberal, and they were just really shocked by what they saw. I think what the actions the government took over the pandemic, as I said. And people will come out and they've thanked us for standing up against the vaccine mandates. They just really felt that they weren't being heard. They're thanking us for standing up and saying, we're going to make sure parents have a say in their children's education. And really what it's going to come down to is we saw it happen in Virginia with Governor Youngkin. It's families, I think, are going to come out and determine this election. And it's usually families who are the unenrolled voters, because they're so busy just working and raising their family that they don't necessarily get involved in politics. But now politics has come into their home, and I think they're ready to get involved.
Do you think, and using this sort of the focal point as being the pandemic, and you being almost a victim of the mandate, where you lost your job because of your decision not to be jabbed, do you think as a whole Americans are losing our freedoms?
I think it's a very slippery slope, and the fact that many people went along with things like the vaccine mandates at first. Slowly there's lawsuits happening across the country that are throwing these kinds of mandates out, but I think that under the guise of a public health emergency, the government overstepped a lot of its authority and did things that were totally unconstitutional, like restricting travel, restricting people's ability to go to church, people's ability to gather. So I think we need to just pay attention and make sure that we're vigilant and pushing back on any government policy that is, infringing on our rights.
I have to go back now and just ask, what made you get into politics altogether?
Oh, yeah. Excuse me. So when I was a brand new nurse back in 2011, I was working at a nursing home, and at the end of the week I would look at my pay stub and I would see what my gross pay was versus my take-home pay. And I saw that really the federal government taxes a whole lot more than the state does, but even so, I was losing almost $300 out of every paycheck to taxes. And I was thinking to myself, I'm working so hard, I'm working 16-hour shifts, I'm trying to pay off my student loans, I'm trying to pay off my car, and I could really use this money. So I think we're overtaxed. At the same time, I started paying attention to state politics, and this was when Governor Deval Patrick was in office. And this was a time when he was redoing his his office at the State House redoing the drapes that was costing millions of dollars. And I thought that's just not a great use of our tax dollars. I'm sure you could find drapes that don't cost millions of dollars. And there were state agencies, state departments that just were losing money by the millions. They just couldn't account for where it was going. And then at the same time, there was a proposal for an $8 billion tax increase, the largest tax increase the Commonwealth had ever seen. And to me, I thought that was totally wrong. I have to live within my budget. I'm sure everyone, in this room lives within their budget, and the state government should have to do that too. They should be more accountable for the way they're spending our tax dollars.
And the rest is history. Now, you actually worked in the legislature, the state legislature, with your running mate, Jeff Deal.
Yes, we served as state representatives together. As I like to say, whatever the squad is now in DC, we were kind of the opposite of that in Beacon Hill. There was a handful of us that were really trying very hard to bring more transparency and accountability to the State House, really put the supermajority of Democrats on the line for the awful policy and legislation that they were putting forth. We would try to get them on roll call votes so that the people could see how they were voting on these things. We were trying to protect the taxpayers. One of the things I'm most proud of is that we were able to work on repealing the automatic gas tax that was put into effect in 2014, which would have tied our gas tax to inflation indefinitely. And we thought in 2014 that that was a bad idea, not even knowing what gas prices or inflation would be
Can
now.
you imagine what we would have been paying?
And I think that's what a lot of is missing in state government, is that critical thinking of long-term and unintended consequences.
Yes.
They just don't seem to weigh those when they're making decisions that affect everyone in the state.
Now, as the chair, being a lieutenant governor, you're going to be the chair of the Governor's Council.
Yes.
And for those who don't know, in the viewing audience, the Governor's Council are the ones that appoint the judges. Do you think that we need to have a better standard for scrutinizing and selecting the judges? I ask you this because I'm interested as an attorney as well. What would your plans be to run the Governor's Council?
Well, I think the forefront should always be judges who have a good understanding of the Constitution and how to implement that when they're making the decisions on sentencing. We have the legislature who is doing things like trying to pass different types of reforms that would get rid of mandatory minimums and things like that for certain offenses. And actually, this isn't usually very popular on the Republican side, but I'm actually not really in favor of mandatory minimums because I think that takes away the discretion of the judges to be able to sentence for what fits the crime based on the evidence in the case. So the legislature shouldn't be doing the job of the judges. What we need to do is make sure that we have strong judges who are able to make competent decisions when sentencing or convicting criminals of crimes. So definitely we need to make sure that we see their record, whether or not they're letting out violent offenders. I mean, we're seeing this abysmal failure in places like New York City where they have just a rampant violent crime because they're so soft on bail and letting criminals out. And I mean, people that have long and violent histories. So I think it's definitely, you have to take into account their history, make sure that that we can really vet them and make sure that they're going to uphold the rights in the criminal justice system of the people in the system, but also protecting the people of Massachusetts.
Excellent. And so, is our state court system too liberal, as we are hearing happen in many states around this country? Is that something that we're dealing with today?
I mean, we have a few examples of judges who have made some really poor judgment calls. For instance, up in my area, there was Judge Feely in Salem who let an illegal immigrant go. He was accused of drug trafficking, and this judge helped him slip out the back door before ICE could come because that was a crime that would levy deportation. And I guess it was a hot mic, they were caught on the hot mic saying that if this was a U.S. citizen, they wouldn't have done that. They would have basically held them accountable for the crime. But because this person was an illegal immigrant just trying to provide for their family, they allowed them to slip out the back door and evade the authorities. And then we've seen back in, again, the 2014 time, there was Justina Pelletier, whose parents were trying to get her released from the custody of a children's hospital, and the judges kept ruling in favor of the hospital, and it was also almost like medical kidnapping.
Yes.
Because really the parents were not given any rights, and so eventually with public pressure the courts did the right thing. But those are just some examples of the fact that, you know, judges have a crucial role to play, and we need to make sure that we're appointing good ones.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you.
Well, you know, one of the things that I worry about is the other epidemic. We're so focused on the pandemic of, you know, COVID and the residuals, but I worry about the other epidemic, and that's drug abuse or mental health, untreated mental health, and drug abuse, and the whole cascade of issues that are happening. We've got open borders, we've got people now flooding into Massachusetts, fentanyl coming in. How do you look, and as Lieutenant Governor, as Governor, Lieutenant Governor, how do you look upon helping that or resolving some of that?
Well, I think one of the things we can do is try to make Massachusetts a less desirable state for illegal immigration. And right now we do have sanctuary cities and towns. And we have a law that's set to go in effect next year that would provide driver's licenses to illegal immigrants. Now, luckily, we were able to put together a task force to get a referendum on the ballot in November that the voters can decide to repeal that. But I think that's one of those things that makes Massachusetts a magnet state. And proponents of that bill will say that these are just people trying to get their families fed, trying to get to and from work. And I don't doubt that there are people that are coming here to make a better life for their families. I think, you know, we have an immigration system that is broken and needs to be addressed. But in the meantime, there's also people coming here for the wrong reasons. And that was evident by just recently the migrants that were dropped off on Martha's Vineyard. One of the newspapers, I think it was the New York Times, did a whole story on one of these migrants. And a quick search of his name shows that he was a convicted drug offender from Venezuela. So it's not all families that are coming here for a better life. It's also people that are coming here that we don't know their background. We have no way to vet them. So I think in the end, it's not wrong for the people of Massachusetts and the leadership in the state to say that we want to protect the people of Massachusetts first.
Well, I think we also saw a lot of hypocritical behavior.
Yes,
with
they got them out of
Martha's
there
Vineyard.
faster than we got our people out of Benghazi.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you know, that's
Their hate doesn't live here signs were replaced by no trespassing signs.
yeah.
Yes,
And
yes.
they gave them a hot meal. Now get the heck out of here.
Right.
You know, that's pretty
Right.
much what it was.
Yep.
I hate to do this, but we have to really call this short now. You've told us so much, but what we'd like you to do is tell the viewers why you want to be Lieutenant Governor, why you think running in this particular election is very important for you and Jeff Deal, and where we need to go from here.
Yes. So I think that in a lot of ways, this election is going to be a turning point for Massachusetts, because you have on one ticket the Deal-Allen ticket, and we're saying that we want to protect your constitutional rights. We want to make sure that the state is respecting your freedoms. We want to make sure that they're respecting your tax dollars, that we're spending it wisely and we're accountable to that. We want to make sure that families are at the forefront of the decisions that are being made, and parents have a voice in their children's education. And of course, you know, everybody wants to save the planet, but I think that we need to take a critical look at all of this green legislation that's coming so fast and furious right now, because a lot of it doesn't really do much for the planet, but it enriches lobbyists and politicians who put forth these policies. And the people of Massachusetts shouldn't have to figure it out how they're going to make this work after these policies are put in place. For instance, the law that says no fuel-powered vehicles will be sold after 2035. And we don't have the infrastructure right now to support
Tell
everyone.
somebody in Florida right now who's without power that they
Exactly.
that they need to evacuate.
We could barely handle the heat waves with everybody's air conditioners on. And then on the other hand, we have Maura Healey and Kim Driscoll. And they are, if you ask me, just completely radical. They are so consumed by their climate agenda that they're willing to really sacrifice the people of Massachusetts in order to make sure that they get their climate change stuff put forth, and without a lot of foresight on how it's going to affect people. We see it already. Maura Healey was so proud of stopping those pipelines, those 2 pipelines that would have fed natural gas here to Massachusetts. She was so proud of that. And that was a few years ago when it was all well and good to be saying that she's saving the planet, but now these policies are not just ideas anymore. They're actually taking effect, and they're having devastating outcomes for the people of Massachusetts. We're talking about our energy rates spiking by a reported 64%.
Right.
People aren't going to be able to afford that. We have Mayor Kim Driscoll. She's currently the mayor of Salem. She put in place vaccine passports in the city of Salem during the pandemic. And she was forcing high school kids to get COVID shots if they wanted to take part in any high respiratory sports. So, I mean, I think that's just totally wrong that you say to these high school kids, well, sorry, you want to play field hockey, but not unless you get this shot. So these are the types of people that are going to impose their will on the people of Massachusetts. They have no regard for the Constitution, no regard for your tax dollars. They're pretty much just tax and spend types. And Massachusetts really has a choice to make this November. And I hope that people do their due diligence and research all the candidates and make sure that they make the best decision that's going to help them and their families in the long run.
Thank you very much, Leah, for coming on and joining your Right to Know, and for the viewers. We want you to remember that your local city or town Republican Committee is the only organization that holds dear your grassroots rights, your conservative values, and your constitutional liberty. We'd like you to join us at the Fitchburg Republican City Committee, but if not, just remember the GOP, because for us, GOP stands for growth, opportunity, and prosperity for all people, and we always stand for freedom. Thank you and good night.
America, we stand for freedom, so let us all use values that preserves our rights and goes forth in power and might, that reflects our values and preserves our rights and goes forth in power and